Hey there, ducklings. Today, in this video, I'm going to have to get into some real talk, and it's going to be a lot, and a lot of it is going to come from a very personal place, and I hope it's going to help as many people as possible who need something like this at this moment to resonate with. I'm not saying that I'm the first person that's going to have put any of these messages out. I'm not saying that I have some access to portals of wisdom in this area that other people don't have. But sometimes I just feel like the timing can be very divine when it comes to when a person is ready to hear this kind of thing, or when a person is ready to allow this kind of message to go in. And I'm hoping that for some people it will link up with where they are now and with their readiness to be able to receive this kind of message or have this kind of conversation. At the time of filming this, I literally just put a post out on Instagram, and it was about something very similar to the topic of this video. It all ties in together, so I'm going to be reading some of the things that I wrote on Instagram, but I'm going to be going much deeper into it. I feel really called and really compelled to talk about it a lot more deeply in this video, so hopefully it helps. It feels very, very nice to find at a point in your life that you are the person that somebody else can rely on. And, you know, it feels amazing to do care in the community, to do volunteering, to be of service in various different ways like that, where you feel like you're effectual in the world and you're effectual in your society. You are having a positive effect in your neighborhood. You are, you know, maybe helping the stressed single mother over the road from you by buying her some shopping. And that's all amazing kinds of things. But what I'm talking about is the kind of experience where somebody that you deeply love, somebody that you really value, somebody that you may even be very deeply in love with, and they're in love with you, someone like that is turning to you as the person they rely on, the person they trust, maybe even the only person in the world that they trust with certain things. They're opening up to you about things they've never told anyone. They're coming clean about shadows that have been on them, pressing on them for years, maybe. They are telling you that you are opening up this incredible healing energy for them in their life, or you are the catalyst for a great change that's going on inside of them. Maybe they're not being that overblown with it, but maybe it's just obvious through the things that go on in your relationship with them that you have a very important part to play in that person's life, that they do rely upon you. You are the person that they call when the shit hits the fan. There is something addictive about that. There is something that can be very intoxicating about that, and there is also an addictive component to that for a great many people. Now, for me personally, I am very connected to the archetypes of the carer or caregiver and the healer. And it wasn't always that way, but it started to get that way from about the age of 19 onwards, when I started to do my personal work to look at the negative patterns that I was adopting in my life and recognize that I was on the path to absolute self-destruct. I did have mental health problems. I did have problems with my emotional well-being. I also had a lot of negative habits, a lot of things I was doing that were not helpful, and a lot of behaviors I was using to mask the issues I was going through. I know a lot of you have seen the scar tissue all up and down both arms, you know, in life or in videos. If I'm wearing short sleeves when I start filming, I'm just going to carry on wearing short sleeves. So I know a lot of you, even if you haven't heard my story, have seen the scar tissue on my arms. I self-harmed for 7 years. I restricted my food, all of that. You know, so for me, the age of about 19 was the beginning of quite a long journey. And I can't say that that journey was plain sailing. I can't say that it was really easy, and it was, you know, it just sort of went from A to B really smoothly. But by my mid-20s, I was very, very connected to the archetypes of the healer and the carer. I had this feeling that in some way or another, I wanted to put my messages out into the world. I recognized that whenever I used the cards for my friends or my family members, anyone that needed a reading, you know, more than 9 times out of 10, it turned out to be what they really needed in that moment. And, you know, I became more connected to the archetypes of the healer and the carer as I got older. I am the kind of person, and maybe some people will really resonate with this, I'm the kind of person that goes to a party, and this has happened to me so many times, I can't tell you how many times, that I'll go to a party and somebody will start opening up to me within minutes about the suicide of their friend, about this terrible accident they went through, about their heartbreak that they've never been able to get over. And they'll say to me after a while, I'm really sorry, I don't even know you. I don't know what is going on here. I normally never talk about these things. I'm so sorry if I'm shitting on your night or I'm, killing the vibe, but I just feel so comfortable with you. And most of the time I will say to them, it's okay. I do this for a living. I'm a tarot reader and all that, it's okay. It's something that people seem to feel like, I'm able to give. Now, obviously, there's lots of things that you can do magically, ritually, spiritually, psycho-spiritually, energetically to stop those interactions from happening. If you are, if you are tired of them, if you've reached your limit with them, if you find them really difficult. And sometimes it is a simple case of me not having done that work. Other times, I want to be that person. I've set my life up so that I am that person, right? I like to help. I want to hear people's stories. I very often will sort of urge somebody to say more on a night out, or if I'm talking to somebody in a social situation, even if we're only just friends or we've only just met, they'll mention something and I know that there's more, and I know that they maybe want to say more, or they maybe feel like it's pressing on them, and I will be the one to be like, go into that for me a bit more if you care to, like, how did you feel about that from your perspective? Like, I am that person. Okay, so it's not always super important to me to be able to shut those conversations down. I appreciate those conversations as well. I value being able to be that person that one can sense is able to hold space. There's a privilege to that, and I don't take that privilege for granted by any means. For someone like me who's very connected to the healer and the caregiver archetypes, obviously the feeling of having somebody that you love or who is in love with you, reliant upon you, opening up to you about things they have never told anyone, needing you in their hours of need, seeing you as their savior, as someone who really is giving them something that they've long needed, that they've thirsted for, is particularly intoxicating. In my view, there is a spectrum when it comes to archetypal energies and forces and figures and ideas in the world. It's not just like, oh, the victim's a bad archetype and, the hero is a good archetype. No, for me, there's a spectrum of light and shadow, or positive and negative, useful and not so useful, passive and active, dormant and awake, conscious and unconscious, whatever terms you want to use. I feel that the caregiver and the healer are archetypes that, there's quite a good awareness, a good conscious awareness of what those archetypes are when they're in light, when they're conscious, when they are useful in the world. But the conversation around how they can be so negative, they can be so damaging, they can have destructive aspects as well. That's the conversation I'm urging us to have now in the comments underneath this video. That's the conversation I guess I'm urging you to have with yourselves if you know you need to. There is a really dark, difficult, negative, destructive side to being in touch with your caregiver and your healer archetypes, to the point where people see it, people sense it. And let's face it, people also latch onto it. People also take advantage of it. And every individual situation is different. Sometimes the situation can involve a person who is giving, over-giving, very connected to their healer archetype, wants to help, maybe wants to even fix a person. And the broken person, the needy person, latches on, and they are manipulative. They play games. They know how to get what they want out of that healer, that carer, that fixer. And it becomes a really dangerous dynamic. Now, in other cases, it's not as conscious as that. In some cases, it's going to be the healer, the carer, the overgiver, the fixer, who's going to latch on actually much more persistently and predominantly to the broken person. And they're going to really sort of play that role to the hilt, even if the broken person is trying to urge them away from it and trying to say, no, you've done enough, or I need to sort myself out. Sometimes it will be the healer themselves that is like, no, this is my identity. This is how the dynamic is going to go. I'm going to help you. I'm going to fix you. So it's not always as straightforward as the person who is needy and broken being the aggressor or the manipulator, although that is, a common thing. I think in a lot of cases it is 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Okay, so the broken person, the needy person, the person who is going through things and is grappling with shadow will sort of cling on to you as the overgiver. Recognize that what you're giving them feels warm, it feels good, it feels safe during their dark time. And they will learn ways of controlling how much you give to them. And they will learn ways of manipulating you into giving more. And maybe dropping your own projects, your other friends, your responsibilities, your dreams in order to keep coming to them and keep giving to them. And sometimes that will be consciously done, and sometimes it will be something that neither of you are even remotely aware of. You don't know why the cycle keeps going like this. You don't know why one of you feels constantly needy and constantly looking for that fix, and the other one feels constantly drained but constantly desirous to do more and more and more with no fuel in the tank. And it's like both of you are clueless, you know? So it's not always this very Machiavellian thing where one person has the keys to all of the control and they know they do, and the other person is just like being taken on this terrible, treacherous ride. That can be the dynamic, but I think it's usually obviously more complicated than that. Nevertheless, and this is something that I really want to stress, we have a responsibility to recognize what it is that we are doing, whether we are the one that is overgiving, trying to fix, trying to heal, or whether we are that broken person, that person that is in need, and that person that is taking a lot. We have a fucking responsibility to see what we are doing and to see how it is damaging ourselves and others. And as I'm going to get to in this video, sometimes you have to be the one to take that responsibility because the other person will not do it. And this is a video for those overgivers. It is a video for those fixers, those healers, those people that are very connected to those archetypes. But I would recommend, of course, that this video be watched by people who feel like they are probably the needy one, the broken one, the hungry one, the one who is taking the energy and the time and the focus from the overgiver. It's important, if you know you're in that role, that you watch this as well. This is for you too, equally in a way, because you need to understand how you are using the power that you have, whether it's really unconscious, whether you don't mean to, or whether you know in a way that there are patterns that you are consciously feeding into. Whatever role you are playing, even if you are just an outsider and you're watching this video because you have a friend or a family member who is an overgiver and you're thinking, oh my goddess, how do I get them out of this? Fuck, maybe Kellyanne will have some answers. Whoever you are in this scenario, we all have to take responsibility for the actions that we are partaking in. And think about why, the unconscious reasons why we might be coming back to those actions and back to those actions time and time again. And sometimes the answers aren't pretty. That's shadow work, baby cakes. That's fucking shadow work, okay? It's not all teddy bears, picnics and unicorns, and fucking flowers and candy and all that jazz. It's not always the cocktail ring to end all cocktail rings, darling. Shadow work is fucking shitty. You get in there and you're like, damn, I've been doing that because I've been exerting control over this person, or because I'm afraid to be alone, or because I'm jealous of them, or you find things in shadow that you don't want to find. That's why we say it's scary, Fucking should be. Because if all you find in there is, that you don't like making your bed and I don't know, you don't empty the bin sometimes, then damn it, lucky you. But for most of us, there's a whole host of shit in there that we didn't want to see and that we have to grapple with. Situations differ when it comes to this stuff. We're not always talking about a straight up case of a narcissist clinging on to a codependent overgiver and then, having this terrible, emotionally abusive relationship with them. But I definitely, would say that is a cross section of cases. That is what's going on sometimes, and it's up to you to figure out what resonates with you about what I'm saying and what doesn't, and what applies and what doesn't. I don't know your personal situation, but I do know that I need to make this video and I need to get it out as quickly as possible. It's on my heart, and I can feel that I need to give it to the world. Let's say I feel guided to talk about this, and that's what I'm going to do. So now I want to read for you the Instagram post that I wrote. I will also leave a link to it down below if you want to refer to it later. This is what it says. It says, making peace with who I am was such an arduous process with so much broken glass and blood and sadness along the way, darlings. With my gathered strength and my booming voice and my fearlessness over the past few years of increasing personal power, I perhaps arrogantly told myself I could never be brought low by toxicity, deceit, and awful, deep down, soul-crushing drama ever again. But I was absolutely wrong. Because I am intensely loving, I am strongly connected to the giver and healer archetypes, their shadowy aspects as well as their conscious, healthy ones. I desire to be a force for good in this world. I know how dark it can get inside the psyche. And so when someone is lost and they turn to me and rely on me as a saviour, I am at risk, no matter how slight that risk is. of forgetting myself and sacrificing my mental well-being for that broken person. Please, if you see this happening to someone in your life, don't think of them as weak just because they are giving up too much of themselves for that person. If it's happening to you, don't be cruel to yourself, but see your self-abandonment as soon as you can and act swiftly to reverse it, my lovelies. They don't need you to fix them. You cannot fix them. You cannot be the saviour. You must pull up before you crash with them. I just want to say that it hasn't been very long at the time of filming this video. It hasn't been very long since I put that Instagram post up. And I just want to say that the response already has been absolutely overwhelming. And I really appreciate all of the empathy and the comments, and just the response to it has been incredible. And it's part of what made me feel compelled to talk about this in more depth. And I want to read from my notes here. As I was thinking about making this, I made some notes to make sure that I don't forget any of the things that I really want to put across. And one of the things I wrote was, due to the healing and growing I've done, I told myself I was never going to be in a situation where I would fall prey to this kind of dynamic again. And by this kind of dynamic, I mean like the overgiving and linking into that broken person who was in need and who had all these problems, and I was just giving and giving, right? And I've put here, I was wrong. You don't suddenly find yourself immune to every single toxic dynamic. You still need to look out. It might be a specific person who can get to you like that for specific reasons. It might be that it's a specific time in your life where you're just particularly vulnerable to that kind of dynamic. It might be that the person, the broken person, the person in shadow, they seemed so strong in the beginning and they only became needy and sort of started sucking your energy once you were completely invested. So it can sometimes be that you fell in love with them, or you fell into a close connection with them when they weren't that way, or they didn't seem that way. But because of the way that you are, it's like you drew them into this desire to have a deeper relationship with themselves and sort out their shit, and then you inadvertently became a really important cog in that machine of them sorting out their shit. And then you end up forgetting yourself. You end up leaving yourself and your projects and even your other relationships, your other friendships on the shelf in favor of being constantly and more constantly available to this person. I don't see myself as weak. My friends and my loved ones don't see me as weak. I see myself as strong as fuck. And even when I'm not feeling strong, even when I'm telling myself I'm weak in some situation, or I'm not capable in some situation, when a friend or a loved one says to me, Kellyanne, you are so strong, you are so brave, I believe it. I believe it even when I'm not really feeling it, because I do know that I've been through a lot to get to where I am. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, if I can go through a situation where I've been pulled into this toxic overgiving, and if I can go into a situation where I'm feeling as though that is validating me and that is my worth in the world, then it's not weak. It happens. It happens. And sometimes, like I said, it happens because you fall for that person when they're not in that state of being, and you might even be the catalyst for it. And I want to talk about that later in this video, because that can be a thing that happens, and that's part of what's happened to me recently. And sometimes it's just that you're at a place in your life where maybe you've done a lot of healing. You know you can be an overgiver. You know that you can be a bit of a toxic healer, if you will. And you know that you can end up getting lost in other people's problems. But you've done a lot of healing around it. You feel very strong. You feel like you're not going to ever do that ever again. But it could be that you're just at this vulnerable point in your life. You've just lost somebody, you've just had major surgery, your career isn't where you need it to be. You know, something has happened that has made you susceptible to a form of behaviour that you know is toxic, that you totally told yourself that you'd gotten over. So you still need to keep one eye open. And that's why, with all the self-love messages that I put out and all the self-love content that I've done, I always say self-love is a daily practice. It is not a destination that you arrive at and then you never need to do any more work. It is a daily practice, because daily challenges may come along that will really confront you and make you feel like you want to do the unself-loving thing. And so it's got to be something you commit to daily. It can't be something where you just say to yourself, oh, great, I'm healed. I know what's what about my past. I love myself now. Awesome. No, you have to be vigilant And I think that when I say self-love is a daily practice, what I mean whenever I've said that, and I've been saying it since 2013 or 2014, whenever even before the first self-love September, I've been saying it's a daily practice. And what I mean by that is you've got to be fucking vigilant. You cannot just tell yourself, I've done the work, I'm never going to fall prey to that shit again. Because actually, we all go through times in our lives and experience things in our lives that cause us to be susceptible to a toxic relationship dynamic. And I'm not into calling people toxic, but I certainly will say that that there can be such a thing as a toxic relationship dynamic. I'm sorry, there can be. So, you know, as much as I don't like it when people refer to others as toxic or vampires, I mean, that's not really for me. But to say that there is such a thing as a toxic relationship or a toxic bond, 100% there is. And if you're telling yourself that you're past that and you're never going to fall prey to that again, might I advise vigilance? Because sometimes you're just at this point in life where that's what ends up happening, even with the work you've done, even with the point of self-understanding that you've come to. And it's not weak. It's just one of those things that happens, but you've got to have the self-awareness to pull yourself out of it. The other thing is that sometimes these sorts of dynamics can be so easy to spot with other people. You might have helped a friend through them. You might do a similar sort of job to me where you help people and you talk to people and you've, you know, identified things like this with them and you've helped them with it in some way. You know, you might be the go-to person in your group and you might have seen these dynamics lots of times. And you might really feel that they're unfortunate and you might have tried to help people out of them, but it can still happen to you and you can still be in a position where you can't see it yourself. You do have to be vigilant. If you tell yourself, oh, there's no way I could ever, you know, end up in such a situation as that, then you are not taking care of yourself properly. You have to acknowledge, if you've ever been an overgiver, then you have to acknowledge that you could fall prey to that. And I think as well, with someone like me, I feel like what I do now with my work, with my creative output, with everything that I do online, with all of the videos that I put out and the sessions that I give and everything, I feel like this is my fucking destiny. Like I feel very, very compelled to do this. And as a result of that, I could very easily blindly fall into this trap of telling myself that there's no way that I could fall prey to such a dynamic that would be so unhealthy for me and so harmful for me. And I think if you know that you are really good at caring and giving and healing, and people do actually praise you quite constantly in your personal life, or maybe even also in your professional life for doing just that, you can definitely sit pretty and be very, what's the word? Not content. What the hell is the word I'm trying to look for? Complacent. There we go. Damn it. Words are slippery. Sometimes they're slippery suckers. Complacent. You can be complacent and you can tell yourself, doesn't happen to me though. Doesn't happen to me. And I'm going to make a video that's going to come out in a few days' time about relationship red flags. If you're resonating with this part of this video, please come back to the channel and watch that video. If you're not subscribed, get yourself subscribed, because if this is the kind of content that's resonating and it's making sense and it's helping, there's going to be more of that coming in the following weeks, more of this kind of thing. So if you'll allow me, baby cakes, I do want to read from the notes again that I made when I was putting this video idea together. I've written here, if you set yourself up as someone whose worth is derived solely from being able to help people through their issues, you will end up with low self-esteem. You can know that it's a superpower of yours to help, to heal others, you know, and you can use that superpower. But if you put all your eggs, all of your identity eggs in that one basket, especially with one person who is demanding more and more from you, and needing you more and more, then you're putting your soul into poverty. You're putting your self-love in jeopardy. Each time you manage to help that person, you will feel your value increasing because you've put your worth innately into that person's healing. You've recognized that they esteem you as being the one that is helping them, that is, you know, really being the catalyst for change for them, that when you care for them, it feels like no other care that they've ever received almost, you know? And they may tell you that, or they may just act that way with you. In my situation, it was both. I was regularly told, like, no one's loved me like this, and I've never loved anyone like this, and all I need is you. And, you know, this is just like so nurturing and so much of what I need, and I feel so much better. When someone's saying that to you, It's intoxicating, okay? It's intoxicating. And you will start to see your worth as being dependent upon being able to maintain that position as the person who can help, the person who can even potentially fix what is wrong with that broken person, whatever it might be. In my notes, it says each time you can't help that person, or they push you away, or they need something that you can't provide, or they're not sure what they even want, you will see yourself as a failure. They may never do and say enough to convince you that it's not your failure, and that in fact, they may even enjoy seeing you feeling like you are a failure, depending on the person and the situation. So you might have some situations where you can't help for some reason. They're a mess and nothing you do is working. None of the usual tricks are working, or maybe they are even pushing you away for reasons they don't understand. And maybe in that moment, you will really need them to say to you, it's not your failure. It's not your fault. I need to help me. And it's nothing that you've done. I just need to be on my own, or I just can't figure out why I'm feeling bad. If they don't expressly say that to you, then you may really start to blame yourself. And even if they do insist that it is not your fault and it is not your problem to sort out, if you've told yourself that that is your identity, you are the person that can help them, that can heal them, that can rejuvenate them, that can inspire them, that can empower them, that can help them to heal their fragility and their brokenness, then when you can't do it, how do you feel? What position have you put yourself in? A position of destitution, a position of feeling like, well, I can't play my role, so I'm worthless in this situation. I'm no good to this person. And you will miss that warm feeling of being good for them and being needed by them. It's a very dangerous position in which you would place yourself willingly. So again, it's about that recognition. You've got to be conscious of what you're doing to yourself. If you can help and you can be of service and you are that individual that comes through the door or answers the phone and instantly brightens up that broken person's life, that's addictive. That's a drug. That's a drug, baby cakes. Come on. I mean, it feels so fucking good, especially if you're in love with them, to know that you're the person and maybe that there was never a person like you before. Even if that ends up being untrue, even if it ends up that they've had a string of people before that did exactly the same thing as you until they burned out or seriously damaged themselves or had to pull the parachute because it was getting out of hand. If they tell you that you're the one and you're the only one, and my God, they get something from you that they've never gotten anywhere else, that is addictive. Even for somebody with a high sense of self-esteem and someone who isn't really overly identified with the healer archetype or whatever, that can be very tasty, very sumptuous, very Moorish. It's a very delicious feeling. And what happens then? What happens if you can give them what they need? What happens if you do manage to calm them? What happens if you do make them feel better and you make them feel safe? You want to stay with them. You want to keep giving to them. You want to give more and more and more. And that means that you undervalue your other relationships. You maybe don't get back to messages from other friends, family, loved ones, whatever, partners, whatever it might be. Your creative projects suffer. Your spiritual life suffers. Maybe even your physical health and wellness and your goals in that regard suffer. And maybe also sometimes your financial life suffers if you are regularly making dinners for this person, or you're regularly driving over, you're spending money on food, you're spending money on fuel, all of that. You're maybe getting them presents, little pick-me-ups, things to make them feel better, whatever the case might be. So in all of these ways, your life is, really becoming thirsty. Your garden is drying up. Their garden is flourishing because you're bringing over all the fertilizer and the water and showing them how to tend the plants. It's a garden analogy, darlings. It's a garden analogy, but it's a good one. You're becoming to go into tarot language, you're making yourself the 5 of Pentacles whilst you ensure that this other person is the 9 of Pentacles, right? And that's not self-love. Even if this is your first video, even if you're watching me for the very first time and you don't even know how you got here, you fucking know that's not self-love. You don't need me to tell you that. That's 101. Everybody knows it's not self-loving to give of yourself so much that you are destitute, you are cold, you are outside, you are without anything, and the other person is inside warm by the fire. And even if that person is calling you in and saying, we have enough, I have enough, thank you, come and sit with me by the fire, you're still out there guarding the door to make sure no enemies come, no wolves come, no one can get near this person that you love because you just love them so much, you love them so deeply. You would do anything for them. You live just to see them warm and safe and happy. I want to talk a little bit about arrogance now, because I think that it's very easy whenever we talk about the shadow side of the caregiver or the shadow side of the healer to paint ourselves as victims. If we are really connected to those archetypes, if we know that we are very skilled at knowing what a person needs, providing and delivering, those things that that person needs, creating an atmosphere, an energy, a feeling for that person that they've never gotten before. If we know we're good at those things and we know that we've been taken advantage of in some way, or we've been damaged because we've given that, we instantly go into victimhood mode. And there's a lot of conversation, I think, that can dangerously fall into that area where we're saying we're victims. We're victims of big bad people that come along and suck us dry. And there's room for that conversation. Don't get me wrong, that conversation should be happening, but it's not the whole animal. In my notes for this video, I've written, it is arrogant to believe that you are the one that they need, and that if you keep showing up and dropping everything else and working your magic, being there for that person, they will be okay. Without you, they are nothing. That then essentially becomes the mindset, and that feeds your ego. Don't pretend that it doesn't. I think that's really part of the seedy underbelly of the sort of shadowy side of this archetype, that it doesn't get enough airtime. We need to recognize that, yes, we can fall prey. We can be victims when we are overgivers. But we also get our egos fed from being perhaps the only one that makes a difference for a person. We have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge how it feeds the ego. We have to acknowledge how that is a part of our responsibility. And that is regardless of whether or not you have been the victim of a highly manipulative narcissist who is very clever at what they do and has made you feel absolutely worthless and as though your only self-esteem can come from feeding their narcissistic supply. But it can also be your responsibility, even if you just love a broken person and they're not necessarily trying to trick you or manipulate you. They just appreciate what you're doing for them, but what you're doing for them is too much by a long way. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter whether you are a victim or not a victim. You might have some degree of victimhood in your situation. That's what I'm saying. Or you may not. But whatever the situation, if you know you're trying to fix a person, you're overgiving to that person, you're letting your own life fall by the wayside, you're jeopardizing your relationships with yourself or others for that person, take some responsibility for how it's feeding your ego to be the one that has the keys to that broken person's sense of happiness, contentment, satisfaction. Be honest with yourself about how that feeds your ego. That is some serious shadow work to do. That is some real stuff to confront. And I think because of what I have been doing for a living for quite some time now with my clients, and because of the content I've been putting out to this audience, I have known for quite a long time that you can let it go to your head. Like, especially lately, the last few weeks, I've had a lot of people messaging me, emailing me, leaving stuff in the comments for me underneath videos or Instagram posts, saying the most amazing things. And Joey Morris and I touched on this in the deep chat that we did about shadow work, which I'll leave the link down below. If you are into this, you will be into that. It's an amazing chat that I had with her, and we were talking about this. We were talking about how amazing it is to receive incredible messages from people who have been very helped by your content. And lately that's happened to me a lot. It's always happened to me. I'm really lucky that people have found that they resonate with my work. And I've had some amazing messages from people saying, Kellyanne, your work got me out of a dark hole. Your work took me away from suicidal thoughts. Your videos helped me to leave a toxic marriage. You know, those comments, that is high praise. And it's weird because I love it, because it shows me that I was right all that time ago, not to push away this calling that I had to talk about things from my perspective. It shows me that it's worth doing, and it makes me feel connected to so many of you. But at the same time, I know that I need to put it down, and I make sure that I read as much of the criticism that I receive as possible as well, because, you know, there are criticisms to be made and I don't help everyone, and that's got to be okay. You can't let it go to your head. What I'm trying to say is that in my line of work, it could be very easy for me to tell myself, like, I'm this amazing person that's facilitated all this healing, and I'm the one, you know, that this person needed to get them out of this. But, you know, I've trained myself from the very beginning of doing what I do now to remember that that shit can go to your head, and you can start to think of yourself as the savior, the fixer, the one with the answer. And I've always said to my clients and my audience, whenever they've given me like full credit for something, I've always tried to say, like, I'm so glad my content has helped you, but you were the one to dig yourself out of that hole. Make sure you give yourself credit as well. Of course, I can't say the same thing to, I mean, I can't reply to all my comments and reply to all my interactions at this point. That would be silly. But I've tried a lot to convey the point that, like, whatever resources you used and you absorbed, you did that. You did that. I didn't come in and force you to watch my video or listen to my podcast or get a reading with me or read my Instagram post. You were open in that moment to something that could heal you, and you give yourself credit for that. That was not me. That was you. And as much as I love knowing that I have been of service, because it is really what I want to do with my life, honestly. Because I have known how bad it can get. I have been in really dark places. I've suffered with psychosis. I've self-harmed. I felt really, really low. I've tried to take my life. I haven't been through everything by any stretch. There's lots of things I haven't gone through. But for some reason, even with people who've had very different lives to me, they can connect with me and resonate with me. Like people that become a part of my audience and like come back to my work. There's a connection there. Like they get me. You do get me. So many of you do get me. And I love that. But it is you. You are the fucking one, not me. Not anyone else. You're the one that decided it was time. It was time for metamorphosis. It was time to get off of your own bullshit carousel. And I just happened to be one of the things that you stumbled across that you thought might help. And you have to give yourself credit for that and for being open to it in any possible way, because it is scary. Change is scary. Confrontation of the shadow is scary. And I did not get you there. You got yourself there. I therefore know very, very well that the same thing can happen on a much more personal basis, where you do start to feel special and chosen when a person that's very close to you in your life sees you as the special chosen person, credits you with helping them change, credits you with any strength that they have. And it can be dangerous, and you can start to believe it. And it is your responsibility to understand that there is an arrogance in believing that you are the only thing that is needed. And also, look, if you're in a close dynamic with someone, partner, friend, family member, whatever it is, if you're in a close dynamic with someone and you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, I know that I'm overgiving, I'm trying to be the fixer, I'm trying to be the healer, but in a toxic way, then you've also got to understand that you can never be the person to fully help, because your dynamic with the broken person itself is not truly healthy. And they need to be able to go somewhere to talk about that. They need to be able to sit in a therapeutic situation, or at least a situation with a volunteer telephone service or something with somebody else. And they need to be able to talk about the relationship they have with you and how that might not be right, and how you are overbearing towards them, or how they might be manipulating you. And sometimes you can't have that honest discussion with them. So you've got to understand that your dynamic with them could be very well part of the problem. How are you going to help with that? You're not going to be able to help with that. You're not God. I'm not God. You know, we can't be the one to help with every single thing. We have to let go and know that sometimes our dynamic with that broken person itself might be a part of the issue. We might be enabling. We might be holding that person back. They might be manipulating us, but they might not know how to say it or even admit it to themselves. So they have to go elsewhere for that help, and you have to let them. And that means you've got to stop telling yourself that your worth is innately tied up with helping them. It's not. It's not. That is not the entirety of your worth. You have to think to yourself, they might be trapping you by convincing you that you're the only one that can help them, and by willingly taking what you're providing. But by the same token, you might be trapping them by convincing yourself and them that that is true and that they do only need you. So often you're trapping each other. Could they do anything near as much for you as you do for them? That's something to think about. That's a question to ask yourself. Could they tend to you in even remotely the same way that you have found yourself capable of tending to them? Do they provide the same feelings to you in any regard that they have described you being able to provide to them? Do they care how they can make you feel those feelings? Do they explore? Do they investigate? Is it an equal relationship? Is it reciprocal? Does it go through shifts and seasons where sometimes you are centered and sometimes they are centered? And it depends upon needs and it depends upon experiences. If not, it's one-sided. It's one-sided. And you are the one essentially really losing the most if you are the overgiver, if you are, the toxic healer, if you are the fixer. You are losing. Like I said earlier, your garden is drying up. If someone is broken, if someone is in need, no matter the extent to which they admit it, it might be a case where they really, truly are like, I'm broken, I'm going through difficulty, you're the one helping me, oh my God, thank you, whatever. Or it might be someone who doesn't even admit that they're broken. They've got all these problems, but they're, feigning like they've got it together. Whatever it might be. If someone broken is in your midst, or that you perceive to be broken is in your midst, and you spend a lot of time and energy talking about their needs, talking about their issues, then they get their fix from your care and attention. And you get your fix from knowing that the care and attention that you give is making them feel even temporarily okay. So who's looking after you? Are you letting anyone look after you? Are you venting to anybody? A lot of the time, probably not, because you want to be loyal to this person that you're helping or fixing or tending to. So you don't want to make them sound like the bad person. So a lot of the time you're keeping a lot of your concerns or your resentment or your tiredness to yourself. You're not sharing it with people. Are you tending your own garden? Probably not. Probably not. Be honest with yourself. Are your crops failing while you help that broken person to get their crops in order and reap their harvest? And you're telling yourself that that is your worth. It is not. It can never be. It can never be. What happens if they reap their harvest and they have their lovely working farm, and then they turn around and they say, I don't want to be your friend anymore, or I don't love you anymore, or I don't want to see you for a while, or I've met someone else? What happens then? You go back to your garden that's grey and shriveled. You don't deserve that. Whoever you are watching this, I don't care. You don't deserve that. I'm telling you right now that you don't. The person that you are helping, the person that you are giving that lion's share of your time and energy to, they should want you to also be tending your own garden. And you will be able to tell whether or not they really want that by how much they encourage you to do it. Very often when someone is broken, when they're going through something really difficult, and they are enjoying the love and the nurturing and the attention that they're getting from someone, it will be difficult. It will be sometimes impossible for them to say to you, it's okay, you know what, you've given enough. You go and do that writing project you're doing. You go and see your other friends. You go and have a night out. I know you've got things going on as well. It's difficult for them to say that because they are addicted to what you are giving them. They're addicted to what you keep feeding them. They don't want to let it go. They want you to stay for another night and another night, or they want you to talk for another hour on the phone, another hour on the phone. They want that attention, that love, that nurturing. So you have to be the one to be strong enough. And it might be that you just pull back in a non-verbal way. It might be that you just make the decision from now to start pulling back, or even to cut off completely. Or it might be that you're in a situation where the relationship requires that verbal statement. It requires you to say, my own garden is failing. And I feel like maybe on some level you don't even care enough about my garden to be interested in whether or not it's failing. But I'm telling you it is, because I'm always here helping you plant your crops and helping you plant your seeds and nurture your plants. And I have to go back and look after my garden, darling. It's dying. It's terrifying for you as the overgiver to imagine doing that. I know, because you've put so much stock in your ability to be the helper, to be the guide, to be the one that is needed, that you're terrified that if you take your foot off the gas in any way, that broken person that you love, that you adore, that you want to be connected to, is not going to see your worth anymore. But if that's what's going to happen, then that is what's got to happen. You've got to let that happen. And you've got to start seeing the worth in you again. If you are so overly identified with the role of helper, healer, nurturer, guide, fixer, what happens when that person gets better or gets stronger or grows their wings? What role do you play? I know that in my recent situation, there's no doubt in my conscious mind, I wanted this person to be strong and to be happy. There's no way that I wanted to keep that person, with their wing broken, so I could keep nurturing. Like, in my conscious mind, I fully was like, no, I want to, if I'm doing any good to this person at all, then awesome, because I want to see them thrive. I want to see them do the damn thing. I believe in them. I believe in their potential. But in my unconscious, I think it's fair to say that somewhere in my psyche, where I didn't know it, maybe I was scared of what would happen if they got strong, because that wasn't our dynamic. I was the strong one. I was the one that was needed, and they were the one that was needy. I was the one that knew how to care and how to be of service, and they were the one that took that and willingly said that they were taking that and taking it, and that they needed to be stronger, but somehow, they couldn't in these moments, and there was too much darkness, and I was the one providing the light and the warmth, and so surely somewhere in my unconscious there must have been this fear of like, wow, what does happen when they get strong and they don't need me for these things anymore? I'm willing to admit that to myself, because I've done enough shadow work to know that sometimes, even when you don't identify with something at all on a conscious level, there's layers to this shit. And I'm willing to accept my part of the responsibility. I'm willing to accept that I'm shadowy too. I'm willing to accept that if I'm a bird and I meet another bird, and we were never really soaring through the sky together, both of us healthy, both of us strong. It was like I was soaring through the sky and I saw this injured bird, and I came down and I started making a nest for this injured bird and helping this injured bird. I'm willing to acknowledge that if that was the dynamic from the fucking beginning, then probably on some level I could only see the dynamic as continuing in that way. And maybe I was afraid of us soaring together, because how was I supposed to know what that would feel like? We never really truly did it, So if you know that you are providing this strength, this nurturing, this nourishment, then on some level, somewhere in your unconscious, you probably are afraid of what will happen if you are not needed for that anymore. Like, what will your role be? And if you imagine that you are feeling that way in any, on any layer of your psyche, then you've got to understand that you're holding that person back too. You're enabling too. You're saying, well, I like this. I like to be the one to wrap you up like a sushi roll and make sure you're fed and taken care of, and make sure you're listened to, and make sure you're nurtured, and make sure your hair is stroked, and you're, I'm helping you with all these different things. Like, I like this, I want this. How's that helpful to them? Of course, in other situations, you're going to find that you try to step back, you try to pull some of your energy back, and they don't like it, and they're malicious about it. And they do try to tell you, either subtly or explicitly, that your worth is tied to how much you can help them. And if that's the situation, honey, pop your fucking parachute right now and get the fuck out, because that plane is crash landing and you don't want to be in it when it does. If it's not a relationship where you can't really fully care about each other, I mean, look, if you need to help someone to understand how to care for you, how to treat you, what your needs are, then there could be reasons for that. Maybe your needs are very specific. Maybe they've been in a long-term relationship or friendships before where they behaved differently and they don't really know what you need. Okay, fair enough, communicate. But if it's a case where they don't seem to really be that interested in how to care for you, Nor do they seem to be that happy when you tell them that you need to care for yourself more and you need to care for them a little less. That is just such a toxic dynamic. Such a toxic dynamic. You cannot fix anyone. It is down to them. It is down to them. Like I said earlier, I haven't fixed anyone. Not a motherfucking soul. You know, you decide when you're ready for the lessons, for the inspiration, for the insight. And I might have been a part of that, or I might not have been, but I didn't fix anyone. And so it surprises me that at this late stage in the game, in my own healing and my own understanding, I could have fallen prey to this, you know, this addiction to the feeling of being that person. When you are the fixer, the healer, the giver, the nurturing one all the time, you should be able to expect to see some longer term positive change coming through from that, right? You invest all of this in, you want to see something positive out. Often that will not happen. It will be the same cycle. If somebody's taking, and you're giving, you will only ever provide temporary relief because you are not really what they need. They need to be able to do these things for themselves. They need to be able to strengthen for themselves from within. So, you know, it's basically like you're slinging them a fish so they can eat for the day, but they don't really know how to go out into the river and fish for themselves. That's what it is. That is what it is. And that's just facts. So you will look at a situation that's been going on for weeks, months, maybe even years, where you recognize you've been nurturing, and nothing's actually really changed long term for the better in them. Not really. Because you get high off of being needed and they get high off of that feeling that you enjoy being needed by them. And so you're in a cycle. So there has been no change. I promise you that the energy, the love, the time, the effort that you've put in to this connection can be redirected beautifully, poetically. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, I do need to pull back, I do need to decrease, I do need to even maybe walk away, I promise you that energy you've been putting in can go in so many other directions, and it's going to be gorgeous. It is so scary to be the one to walk away or to make a change or to de-escalate how much you're giving in this kind of relationship. It's terrifying. I know. But honestly, it is not as scary as you think. And if you need to completely block them, if it is actually become toxic or abusive, and you need to block them, you need to stop them from contacting you. The scariest part is when you do the blocking and the disconnecting. Honestly, there's actually a sweet fucking relief that can come afterwards. Even if you are in a lot of pain, genuinely, you feel that power come back to you. You do. You do feel that power come back to you, I promise. It might be a slow burn or it might be instant, but you start to feel it from pretty much right out of the gate. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, yeah, but if I don't do it for this person, someone else will come along and do it. I want to be the person because, you know, this broken, needy individual that I love and adore, they will go and find someone else to help them. And I can't stand that thought. I want to be the one. Honey, please be the one for yourself now. Because if that person isn't actually ready genuinely all the way down to the foundations to heal and grow and get the help that they need in order to be strong, then they will pretty much immediately find someone else. Deal with it now. Deal with it now. Be honest with yourself about it now. Okay? They will find another supply. And it will be easy enough to do for a lot of them. So just know that if that's your worst fear, just let me tell you right now that if they're not ready to do the work and if they haven't acknowledged that they need to change, yeah, someone else will come along and do it until they realise it's not healthy or they get bored. Probably, yeah, 9 times out of 10. Sometimes they will be ready and willing to do the work and you will mutually part ways because you recognise that the cycle is damaging and toxic and unhealthy, and you at least respect each other enough to acknowledge that. But if you're in a situation where you feel like, well, no, this is the role I play and I'm so terrified that they'll find somebody, you know, to do it instead, that that should be the least of your worries. Your worry should be about how much energy is going into somebody else's garden and how much that is going to affect you in the long term, no matter how old you are, no matter where you are in your life journey. Darling, you need some of that energy for you and for what you're doing and for your other connections. And just to be able to take the air and love your life, honestly, you need it. Take it, have it, enjoy it. Stop giving it away, stop surrendering it. Try to be a little bit more afraid of what is going to happen if you don't take this power and this energy back than being afraid of what is going to happen if you do. I mentioned earlier in this video that I was going to talk a bit about what happens when you come into someone's life and you inspire them to start confronting their shit in a way that they hadn't done before. I might actually just make a full video on this because I know this is already going to be super long and I fully expected it to be super long. I knew I had a lot to get out and I have a lot more to say on this particular topic. But what I will say is that in my personal situation that I'm kind of using as the inspiration for some of the things I've said in this video, it was a situation where I linked up with somebody I had a very, very strong cosmic bond with, there's no doubt, but I have done a lot of work on my shadows. I have gone through and taken inventory. I have been interested, intellectually in the concept of shadow work, but I have gone to the bone with it as well. I've gone deeply, deeply into the systems and workings within myself and looked at the transgenerational trauma, all the ways I was hiding, and I still do that work now. I hooked up with this person who was very inspired by this, who saw this and felt illuminated by it. But actually, they had not done this at all. And not only had they not done this, but when they began to, there was a scary amount of suppressed stuff, bad memories, shitty decisions, immorality, all of that. I just want to say all of that to say this, right? If you're a person who's deeply invested in your self-development, and if you're balls deep in this video by this fucking timestamp, then I assume I'm talking directly to you. You know what I'm saying. If you're really invested in your personal development, right? If you're really invested in your inner growth, in your work that you've got to do, if you're like breaking cycles, cutting bad patterns, confronting shadow, you're going to inspire at least some of the people around you to do the same. They will start to think, I need to take inventory. I need to take stock. And what they dredge up might be too much for you to hold their hand through. It doesn't mean that you don't love them. It doesn't mean that you don't love them immeasurably. But you are not the psychopomp. You are not the shadow guide. You can't be that. That's arrogant. It's got to be them. It's got to be them. You can play a supporting role, but this video isn't for people that are playing like a healthy supporting role. It's for people that are overly giving, playing that role of like, I'm the one that's going to lead you through. No, stop it now if you possibly can. Don't let that be your role. Just a couple of other things, darlings. First of all, if you're watching this because there is a person in your life who is invested at the moment in a toxic dynamic, such as the one that I've been talking about in this video, please be aware that all you can do is what you can do, and you cannot do any more than that. If they are not yet ready to see it, if they do not want to talk to you about it, if they are highly defensive about it when you have tried to approach it, all you can do is what you can do. I will be putting out a video in the coming few days on red flags in relationships, and that may also help you. And it might be something that in some cases you can discuss with your friend or loved one together, just to see if it does sort of help any pins drop for them. But ultimately, like I said earlier in the video, you could be a person that is so awake to this kind of thing in other situations, but it can still sometimes get you. and you still might not be able to see it for quite some time. So if you've done your due diligence and you've tried to be there and you've tried to say, look, I'm not being funny, but this dynamic you've got with this person, it doesn't look healthy, it's not making you happy. If you've done that, that's all you can do. And if it's not time yet for that person to understand what it is that you and maybe other people around are seeing, then that is not your fault. And that is not ultimately something where the buck stops with you. You've done what you can, and that's got to be it. The other thing I want to say is that there are a number of ways you can work with me if what I have said in this video is resonating with you and you feel like it is maybe time to work with me, if you have been thinking about it for a while, or if you want to hook up with me again, if we've worked together before. You know I love to see faces return to me, and I've got all of the notes on file, so I'll refresh my memory on everything we talked about previously and we can get back into it, or if you're in a new place in your life, we can go from there. So the things I'm going to be listing below specifically will be the spiritual counselling sessions and the spiritual counselling packages. I'm also going to be listing the custom design reading, which is where I design a card reading that works for your specific needs. I also offer something called a cosmic bond reading. If you are in a very close, very intense bond with someone in your life and you feel like anything from this video has resonated in any direction or in any way, you might want to look at the spread design for that. If you don't want me to do it for you, just take the spread design and do it for yourself. I don't mind. It's a really effective one. There's also a reading called the breakup balm reading. If you've experienced a difficult breakup and it's because of any of the issues I've discussed in this video, maybe go ahead and book a breakup balm reading. I've also got a healing path reading. If you know that you're healing from a difficult relationship that contains any of the facets of what I've talked about. And I'm also going to link down below the shadow connection reading. If you know that you have a connection in your life that is in shadow and you want the cards to help you with that, and you want insights from me and from one of my decks, go ahead and book that. And as I always say to people, if you do not want a reading with me, the spread positions that I use for those readings that I've designed are freely available to you online. Please use them for yourself. If you don't have the money, if you're not sure if you want to work with me, use those spread designs. They are very powerful. They are very useful. Honey bunnies, I know this was a long one. I know it was intense, and I really hope that it helped people that needed to be helped in this specific way. Like I said, I am coming back in a few days' time with a relationship red flags video. I might put something out before that that's a little bit more upbeat, maybe related to cards or something. I don't know, it depends how I feel. But if there's anything that you want to see from me related to relationships, boundaries, toxicity, any of that, that you feel like I haven't talked about on the channel or you would like to see me speak on specifically, please leave any requests down below, and please get talking in the comments about your own experiences and be supportive of each other. Much love until next time. Blessed be, darlings.